Today on Understanding Immigration, the IRS, the American people, and Biden's crumbling narrative.
All these localities are saying, here we are, we have these resources, this sort of infrastructure where we're going to be able to help homeless people, help people who don't have any sort of background, any sort of infrastructure, any place to live. And all these localities are just getting overwhelmed by people. And when you have mayors of some of the largest Democratic cities in the country who are the ones who are saying, hey, maybe we need to cool our jets here. And then, look at the polling, see the American people are saying the same thing.
There's, a plurality based on on how the question is asked, don't want to see immigration increased. They want it to be decreased.
Coming to you from Washington, D.C., you are now listening to FAIR's Understanding Immigration Podcast.
Welcome back, folks. We're back here today with another episode of FAIR's Understanding Immigration Podcast. This is Ron Kovach, FAIR's press secretary, and I'm joined today by Preston Huennekens, FAIR's government relations manager. Last week, in the dead of the night, the Senate passed the latest reconciliation bill, which in typical D.C. fashion had to include a couple additions which had absolutely nothing to do with funding the government. One of them happened to be making waves, which is they decided to bring on 87,000 new IRS enforcement agents while still keeping the Border Patrol under 20,000 members. Preston, with being one of FAIR's government relations experts, I have to ask, what does this mean for the American people?
It means quite a bit, and not just in the immigration sphere. There was a lot in this bill dealing with everything from climate to increasing taxes on certain individuals, that kind of thing. But we're here, obviously, to talk about the immigration components. And there were some fireworks when it came to immigration in the forms of amendments that were offered by the Republicans. For our listeners at home, the budget reconciliation process is unique in the Senate, where it allows the Senate to pass a bill by a simple majority. So that in this current Senate, that means all 50 Democratic senators plus Vice President Kamala Harris. They can only do this with bills that affect spending. It can only be done once every fiscal year. There's a lot that goes into it. But part of this process allows the minority party, in this case the Republicans, to offer as many amendments to the bill as they possibly can. And that begins the process known as a vote-a-rama. And there was a big one for this bill. And a lot of the amendments that came up in the vote-a-rama had to do with immigration. So one of the first that we're going to talk about is Senator Lankford's amendment, which would have provided funding for the continued implementation of Title 42. This has been a big topic in the immigration debate really since it was first implemented. This was put in place at the height of the COVID pandemic way back in the spring of 2020. What it does is it allows Border Patrol to turn people away at the border, citing Title 42, which is a public health order, which prevents people from coming into the U.S. because of their capability to spread a contagious disease, in this case, COVID-19. This is instead of citing Title 8, which is normally how most immigration enforcement takes place. There has been pressure from Democrats in both the House and the Senate, from various advocacy organizations to end Title 42. They call it inhumane. They think it's turning away too many asylum-seeking aliens, this, that, and the third. So Senator Lankford's amendment would have provided funding for that, going to the end of, at least the end of the fiscal year, which this bill was addressing. And that obviously failed. The Democrats were in lockstep, surprisingly, with fending off the amendments that the Republicans offered. This did not happen in the last reconciliation fight, where there were, the Republicans were able to peel off a few of these, more moderate Democratic senators, and also those who are facing very tough reelection campaigns in states where immigration is a big issue. I'm thinking, of course, of Mark Kelly in Arizona comes to mind. And so, it's one of these issues that's not going away anytime soon. COVID continues to kind of crest and fall down again. And the Biden administration is still kind of tiptoeing around what they're going to do with it. It's still being used, although not as much as it was in the past. But that wasn't the only immigration amendment that we saw. There was another one from Senator Rick Scott of Florida. And this was an interesting one, given another aspect of the bill. So for some background, as a way to raise money in this bill, the Democrats wrote in the additional hiring of 87,000 IRS agents, essentially to crack down on tax evaders. The IRS estimates that they lose billions of dollars every year from not having enough staff, enough resources to go after people that aren't, filling out their taxes correctly or whatnot. And so Senator Scott's amendment would have prohibited the hiring of these IRS agents until at least 18,000 additional Border Patrol agents had been hired. This would have been very important. For our listeners at home, Border Patrol is very understaffed. There simply are not enough people working in Border Patrol, in Customs and Border Protection in general, to deal with what we're seeing at the border. Their morale is at an all-time low because of the policy. Because of the policies that are being put in place by this president and by the Secretary of Homeland Security. And so it's a real struggle to hire Border Patrol agents now. And Senator Scott's motion to recommit with instructions would have given more resources to try and attract new talent. It's something that we desperately need, but it, of course, failed in the Democrat-led Senate.
You think something like that would be common sense?
You think it would be, but this was a rare moment where the Democrats were really in lockstep together. They fended off a number of tough votes. Whether or not the senators who voted, against these pretty common sense amendments, whether they're going to pay for that politically in November, is anyone's guess.
Yeah. You could say that again. And, here's the funny thing is that, it's almost like the American people at this point are really getting fed up about it. Even though the Democrats are the majority party, they have the power, they're able to pass this legislation. The American people don't seem to agree with them. There's actually a couple polls that came out recently within the past month that I really want to bring up here. One was taken by Gallup, and essentially what they did was they wanted to see whether the American people were okay with the immigration levels that they're currently seeing. So what they, in asking their group of people, I didn't see how big the poll size was, but essentially what they said was they had 27% of Americans who were saying that immigration should be increased. 31% of the people who answered their poll said that they preferred that immigration be kept at the current level, and they had 38% of people, which, the largest percentage of this pie here, are saying they want immigration decreased. Taking, sort of a 30,000-foot perspective from this, what we're actually polling is that almost 70% of the people that they polled inside of this said that they didn't want an increase in immigration in our country. And it seems like the policies that, got shot down, got like Langford's proposition, Scott's proposition, both of these got shot down when they were really in favor of what 70% of the people who were answering this poll were saying. And The Economist ran another one where they asked 1,500 people, do you think that immigration makes the United States better off, worse off, or does it not make any sort of a difference? What their poll ended up saying was we had 31% of people who said immigration makes the United States better off, 35% said it makes the country worse off, again, the largest slice of the pie.
Yep.
And then 22% responded that it doesn't make much of a difference. So in other words, essentially half of the respondents, 57%, a little bit over half, ended up saying that they were either negative or they really didn't have a take on how immigration's going. I mean, when you combine these polls, the numbers are kind of eye-popping in a way where, we have 60% of people in one saying it's going to make the country essentially worse off, 70% saying they don't want the level increased, but for some reason the majority parties in both the House and the Senate and almost even the presidency are all saying, well, we want to keep the floodgates open, we want to keep on letting people in. And, do we see any way of this stopping anytime soon?
I don't think that the polling is going to change anytime soon. In fact, this is interesting because I know for a fact, I know the Gallup has polled for this for years, where they ask that and they quantify it by you either want to increase it, remain the same, or decrease it. And for a long time, it was mainly people that were saying it should just be kept at the current level, and then some saying, it should be increased. And what we've seen now is what it looks like when it increases is that people actually don't really care for it. And you're starting to see that reflected in the polling that you have here with the Economist and Gallup saying, actually, no, there's, a plurality, based on how the question is asked, don't want to see immigration increased. They want it to be decreased. Yeah. And also, I think that, in another sense, that's reflected in President Biden's poll ratings for his handling of the immigration issue. That's one of his lowest polling issues aside from economics and inflation. So if that is an issue that he's polling so low at, it's baffling that Democrats continue to push this idea that, we need an amnesty, we need to pass the DREAM Act, we need to pass the Farm Workforce Modernization Act. These are bills that might be popular with their very vocal base, probably very popular with the citizens that are on Twitter and these other groups that are very loud but actually don't have a ton of sway.
Of course.
The vast majority of the American people, like you said, either want it to remain the same or to be decreased. Yeah. And I think that that's reflected both in these Gallup and Economist polls, but also in President Biden's own polling on the issue.
Yeah. And, Biden's narrative, it's even starting to get far off from some of his fellow Democrats who support sanctuary cities, things of the like. I mean, whether you look at, Mayor Eric Adams in New York City, whether you look at Muriel Bowser here in D.C., and, I've even seen reports today talking about how some migrants are, working their way into Charlotte after the busing that, Abbott is doing. And all these localities are saying, here we are, we have these resources, this sort of infrastructure where we're going to be able to help homeless people, help people who are coming into our places, don't have any sort of background, any sort of infrastructure, any place to live. And all these localities are just getting overwhelmed by people. And when you have mayors of, some of the largest Democratic cities in the country who are the ones who are saying, hey, maybe we need to cool our jets here. And then, look at the polling, see the American people are saying the same thing. They're really starting to get out of sync, I think. And, we look at Title 42, we look at, the migrant protection protocols being ended, all these things which are just sort of completely contrary to what most of the population wants. Now, we talked about Senator Langford's Title 42 amendment, and there was actually another Title 42 amendment that was brought up that I kind of want to touch on here. It was brought up by Mark Kelly and Kristen Sinema. Essentially, what they were doing was saying they kind of wanted to extend it, but I think it was somewhat different than what Senator Langford was saying. Preston, you want to go a little bit into that?
Yeah, this was kind of a show amendment where on paper it would extend Title 42, I believe, until the end of the fiscal, or maybe like 60 days. Yeah. It was some sort of time frame like that. Mm-hmm. But this was entirely done for political purposes to cover some of these moderate senators that are facing, backlash over this issue at home. There's a number of senators who are facing very tough re-election campaigns in November. You think of Raphael Warnock in Georgia, who has to run to fill out the seat that he won 2 years ago. Yeah. You're thinking about Mark Kelly, who's in a very similar situation. There are plenty of Democratic senators who want to take a vote that makes people think that they're doing something to address the issue, but that really doesn't have any teeth. And that's exactly what this vote was on, was extending Title 42, but there was no funding mechanism, to actually give CDC and Border Patrol the resources that they would need to actually get more asylum officers down there, to get more agents down there who can actually process these claims. And so the issue hasn't gotten any better, and this amendment certainly isn't going to do anything aside from maybe preventing the Biden administration from ending it, tomorrow. But it's practically going to end if there's no funding for it. And I think that's this was done. It's a very intelligent move by the Senate Democrats to do this. But I do think that a large segment of the American people will understand that this was just for show. This wasn't any substance to this.
Well, the show will probably be good whenever they try to go around Arizona to their town halls, try to tout their agenda, say, hey, we passed Title 42, we got something done on it. Yeah. But, at the end of the day, if we don't have any sort of funding mechanism, any sort of enforcement mechanism, really at the end of the day, it falls flat. And I completely agree with you there. And, even little things, just, trying to bring up laws as to maybe we just don't let people with arrest warrants in our country. That could be something. And what we're seeing now is, Canada just a couple weeks ago ended up saying, if someone is a foreign migrant, they're trying to come into our country, they're not allowed to come in if they've had an arrest warrant. Where, we have our own TSA director who got questioned a couple weeks ago by Senator Hawley. And what Senator Hawley was saying was, he asked him, so how are people getting on planes if they don't have an ID? And even the TSA, the director of the TSA is admitting, we're letting people in if they have an arrest warrant because it's a sheet of paper with their name on it. We don't think they pose a threat to national security. I mean, just little common sense things just don't seem to be clicking with the Democrats right now. And, just personal opinion, I think they may end up paying for it in November here.
Yeah, I think that's right. And, polling is showing that. We're seeing that, the House is, you don't want to say certainly, but almost certainly going to flip to the Republicans after the midterms. The Senate is still going to be a toss-up. That it could go either way. Even if the Democrats lose, one or two, Republicans could lose one. It depends, right? But the House almost certainly will be controlled by the Republican Party, and in preparation for that, the Republican leadership in the House did just come out with a list of priorities for immigration that they want to tackle within the first 100 days of that new Congress. And it's something that tracked very closely with the coalition effort that FAIR has been a part of with other organizations like Numbers USA, like the Heritage Foundation and Heritage Action, their sister organization, with Texas Public Policy Foundation. There's a number of groups that joined this coalition talking about changes that really need to be made that would get the border situation under control. And we're very pleased to see that message has resonated with both Kevin McCarthy and the rest of the leadership in the Republican side of the House, is that they released a document espousing almost every point that we suggested as a coalition. And so it's something that we're obviously going to have to hold them to, and that supporters are going to have to hold them to, because there's, it's very easy to talk about priorities that you want to put in place, but when push comes to shove, you actually have to legislate when you have the opportunity to do so. And so we're looking forward to that. Hopefully, that's something that is able to happen, and they're able to put some pressure on both President Biden and Senate Democrats to get this under control and to take seriously what's happening at the border. The American people are sick and tired of seeing the lack of control that we have at our southern border. And, it might take just flipping one chamber to maybe wake up the administration to the reality on the ground.
At least it would give a microphone to the ideals we're talking about here, whether it be trying to make sure that Title 42 is funded, trying to make sure maybe, hey, even a 10,000 Border Patrol member increase would just be something that would help out the country at the end of the day. And, we have the, like you said, that we have the people on our side now. We have this coalition which, is working in lockstep with the Republican Party, just trying to make sure we're able to amplify things, which is going to be common sense immigration policy, really. And I'm yet to see something really on the other side, which is countering that, which, you get a solid group of people who are actually saying, well, we need the open borders. We need more people in our country. There's not really a lot of people who are echoing that right now. And, really what we see what President Biden is saying, talking about, well, we want to let them in. We want to end Title 42, do all this. But if I'm not mistaken, I think his administration, some members might be saying opposite things. You know anything about that?
Yeah, so this has actually been a recurring issue within the Biden administration, is that there have been essentially two camps among his staff and people that he listens to and that counsel him on the issue. On one side, you have a lot of people who were taken from some of the really aggressive advocacy organizations that wrote his platform that promised giving amnesty to every illegal alien in the country. People who have been fighting, really their whole lives to upend our immigration system as we know it, and really throwing the door open. Those are the people that are saying we need to get rid of Title 42. Those are the people who want to give asylum officers the same authority as immigration judges to rubber stamp asylum claims at the border. This is stuff that would make the situation we're seeing a million times worse. On the other side of that, within Biden's cabinet and within his advisors, there are people who, even though they're sympathetic probably more to those arguments, they are arguing that, look, for pure realpolitik. This is not working. This is not polling well. We cannot appear to have lost control of our southern border. There are aspects to this that we need to be really careful of. And it's been, from the leaks that we've heard and that have been reported in the media, it seems like there's kind of a real back and forth between these two groups, and the president in a sense is torn between which advisors do you listen to. These are both groups are people that helped propel him to where he is now, and he obviously takes their counsel, and so it's been interesting to see that dynamic, and things might be starting to change. There was a leaked DHS report last month that was saying that roughly 30% of the aliens who were released into the U.S. between March and September 2021 did not comply with their release terms, which is very interesting because the Biden administration has said for months, we're not doing catch and release. We've put ankle monitors on these people. We're going by the book. They're showing up for their court dates, this, that, and the third. Well, this report shows that that's not happening. There's nearly a third of them who are not complying with their release terms, who are not showing up to court, who are not checking in with their local ICE office where they end up. And that's a growing concern, because as more and more people come into the United States this way, and ICE isn't getting any bigger, CBP is not getting any bigger. We saw that from the most recent appropriations package. ICE actually lost funding, and so if you're going to see an increase of people coming in while we are decreasing our capability to deal with it, this number is going to grow of people who are not complying with their release terms.
I just want to take a second just so we could actually realize this here. I mean, we're talking in 2021, we had almost 1.5 million border crossings, right?
Yeah, that's
Something
right.
along there.
Of apprehensions, and many of those are people who did enter the United States, who were put on either alternatives to detention or were just released with a court date and said, hey, we expect to see you 2 months from now, hope to see you there.
And 30% of these people, we don't have their names, we don't have their addresses, we don't have their intentions of what kind of jobs they're going to be getting in the country, anything along those lines.
Right. All we got was a promise that they would show up to court. And of course they didn't, and that's and why would they? Because there's no enforcement mechanism to get them there if they're not being monitored by ICE, which ICE is not big enough to do that. They're not being put in detention, both because of policies that this administration has put in place, but also because we don't have enough detention space to begin with, and the House Democrats, in their most recent appropriations package, decreased the number of detention beds that ICE has in this most recent fiscal year. Yeah. So it's a snowball effect of the situation is getting worse, and the appropriators in Congress and President Biden and his administration are not taking action to address it.
And at the very least, we have hundreds of thousands of people just unaccounted for running around our country right now, which is, I think, is one of the most surprising things about this entire conversation here, is the fact that there are just hundreds of thousands of people we don't know where they are. They're not showing up to their court cases. They're not doing what the Biden administration claims that everyone's doing who's coming into our country.
That's right. And even in a recent hearing, FBI Director Christopher Wray brought up this point, and he said that, I'm quoting from here, the volume of people at our border is staggering. It represents a wide array of criminal threats, and our potential vulnerability is something that we know foreign terrorist organizations and others will seek to exploit. Now, we're not saying that every single illegal alien who comes into the United States is a terrorist waiting to do something, but it's a known fact that our border is wide open. We know that we've arrested people at the border that are on terrorist watch lists. We know that, and so you can't just say, well, it hasn't happened yet, so we don't have to worry about it. That's not a serious way to address what's happening. You need to really harden the border to make sure that we're not arresting people that are on the terrorist watch list in the first place, because they can't get to they can't get to the border in the first place. I mean, it's something that when you have a system in place like we have now, where all you have to do is come to the border, claim asylum, and you'll be set into the United States on your own cognizance for 3 to 5 years until your court case is over. Why wouldn't our adversaries abroad, who are well-financed and well-organized, why wouldn't they take advantage of that? Of course they're going to.
I wish I could tell you, but it seems just from this DHS report, from the FBI director, speaking under oath there, talking about all this coming out, it almost seems like the truth is starting to come out. A little bit of the common sense is starting to really see through the Biden administration amongst the noise they've been putting out recently. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think too, this represents, I think as well, people in that second group of advisors to President Biden who understand that there are consequences to what's happening. Christopher Wray, I don't think is going to go up in front of Congress and say, "Oh, everything's fine, and we're not worried about this, and it's not an issue." I don't think he's going to do that. And so when you see someone like that saying under oath that there is a problem, it's one official, but one is maybe all it takes, and we're hopeful that maybe DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas will one day wake up and recognize that the policies he's put in place have really led to some of the issues that we're seeing when you handcuff ICE and you don't allow them to do their job through executive memoranda. That is not a way to run the Department of Homeland Security. That's not a way to run ICE by forbidding them to do their congressionally mandated job. So there are many officials in this administration who we hope over the next couple days, weeks, months, finally wake up and recognize that the policies they've put in place are not working.
Yeah, sort of just need to separate the political language from, what we're actually implementing, because that's the only way we're going to be able to see any kind of change. That's the only way we're going to be able to see a safer America, more secure America, everything along those lines. Well, I will say it's kind of scary to hear this news coming from the White House that they've really been sticking a feather in their cap in the fact where they want to let in as many immigrants as possible, but then we have people inside of the administration itself who are ending up sounding the alarm, saying this is something we need to fix. This is a big problem that we're having. But what we really need to do, first step, I think, just stop rapidly letting people in. We need to really enforce Title 42. We need to increase Border Patrol agents, do all these things to kind of fix it. Well, I digress with all that, but I think it's just about time for us to be getting out of here. We hope that you enjoyed today's episode of Understanding Immigration and that you'll subscribe on your preferred listening platform, whether it be Spotify, Apple, or Google. To learn more about any of the topics we covered here today, please be sure to visit the FAIR website at fairus.org or any of our social media platforms. Of course, we're on Facebook, Twitter, Getter, Gab, all the main ones there. I'm Ron. This is Preston. This has been FAIR's Understanding Immigration podcast. Thanks for listening.